I'm really glad to be down here. It's always fun to come down to LA. I always like being in the South. I grew up in Louisiana. Can y'all tell that? Now I live in southern Canada, right? And I usually live in southern Korea when I'm not in Canada. So I'm an old southerner. Southern California, why not? What I want to talk about today, I'm an historian actually, but I'm a cultural historian. And one thing I've noticed is that Korea has a very complex religious history, especially in the last, say, century and a half, 2 centuries. And believe it or not, Korea may have what is the world's most diverse religious culture, not in terms of the number of different religious groups, that may be the US, but in terms of, I'll show you in a minute, no one group dominates, a number of different groups that have a very strong presence on the Korean religious landscape. And I want to help you visualize the diversity of Korean religion. There are shamans in Korea today. I'll explain later what a shaman is. There are between 100,000 to 300,000 practicing shamans in South Korea today. You don't find that in industrialized societies. You find that in Korea, everywhere, once you know where to look. There are Buddhists in Korea, quite a few Buddhists. This statue was built maybe 25 years ago. It's actually a statue where Koreans can go to pray to. Buddha of healing was to heal the division of the country between North and South. So it's a healing Buddha statue. It's pretty big, as you can see. Can you see the small human figure here? So it's a big statue. When you approach that statue, by the way, you have to climb up 108 steps. Buddhism has 108 causes of human suffering, and when you climb those steps, you understand. Confucianism is still alive in Korea. Very few Koreans call themselves Confucians, but most Koreans still honor their ancestors with either a Confucian-style ritual or a Christian modification of the Confucian-style ritual to honor their parents and grandparents who've passed on. And this is an example of the kind of ritual you would have. You put out food for the ancestors. The nice thing is, by the way, ancestors enjoy the essence of the food, and then you get to eat it afterwards. And there are Christians in Seoul. The Pope visited in 2014. This is a crowd in downtown Seoul. It was about 1 million people came out to see the Pope. He went there, by the way, to raise to almost saint status. In the Catholic Church, you have blessed and then saints. 121 Koreans from the 19th century raised to blessed status, which means all they need is a few more miracles and they'll be saints. And of course, there are also Protestant churches in Seoul. This is a typical neighborhood church in Seoul, not one of the bigger ones. Look how it lords over the neighborhood, the houses around it. And this is not considered a large church. I just simply took this picture out of my hotel room window one day. But you can see, all over Seoul. I'll give you some figures later on how many churches there are in Korea today. So, look at this figure that came from the Korean government. Now, the Korean government takes a census every 10 years, and one of the questions they ask people is, what is your religion? We haven't gotten the 2015 figures yet. I checked yesterday. They still haven't been processed. I don't know why. This is 2005. I don't think they've changed that much, but it shows you in 2005, approximately 11% of the South Korean population is Roman Catholic. Approximately 23% say they're Buddhist. Approximately, it says here 18% say they're Protestant Christians. Koreans, by the way, distinguish between Catholics and Christians. They'll say, are you Catholic or Christian? If you say both, they get very confused. Protestants are probably being undercounted there. It's probably closer to 20 or 21% because of the way they ask the question. But the point is, this diversity, the fact that no one religion dominates, and yet there are 3 that have a substantial part of, if you count Christianity as Catholics and Protestants together, Buddhists and Christians together make up half the population, over half the population, just about. The only other country where Buddhists and Christians are that close in numbers is Singapore. And even there, the gap between Buddhists and Christians is much wider than it is in Korea. So that's why I call it the most diverse religious nation on earth, because of this. You don't have any one nation, one religion dominating, and we'll see later half the people tell the government they don't have a religion. So half say they have no religion, half do, and of those about half are Christian, about half are Buddhist. Now, so that's the point. No one religion dominates. There's the figures again. There's a little group we'll talk about in a minute called Won Buddhist. They claim they have 1 million followers. The Korean government only found about 130,000. But they're important in studying Korean religious culture. So I will talk about them in a minute. We've seen in the last 50 years, I've been going to Korea since 71, but real changes started in the 1960s. A real dramatic change in religion, but in 1995 to 2005, it didn't change that much except for the Catholic figures. Catholics were less than 7% of the population in 1995. Now they're 11%. Okay? At least they were in 2005. It's grown a little since then, not much. The percentage of the population that's Buddhist hasn't changed that much. The percentage that's Protestant hasn't changed that much. Okay? You notice 0.5% say they're Confucian, even though most Koreans use Confucian rituals to honor their parents and grandparents. Okay? So the only religions that showed significant growth from 1995 to 2005 were Roman Catholicism and Won Buddhism. So I'm curious to see if that trend continues in the 2015 census once the figures are available. The Protestants were growing really fast from 1960 to 1995, and then growth leveled off. One thing interesting, 100 years ago, the vast majority of Koreans said they had no religion. The Japanese took over Korea in 1910, governed it to 1945, and Japanese loved statistics. So they went out for the first time in Korean history and asked Koreans, what is your religion? And 3% said they had a religion. Now it's 50%. See? Even the inter-Japanese rule was around 4%. 1965, you begin to see the growth. 12% said they had a religion. Still, you got 88% of South Koreans, this is South Koreans now, saying they have no religious affiliation. By 1985, it's 42%. 1995 was the first time that half the Korean population, again South Korea I'm talking about here, said they had a religious affiliation. You know, I argue with my fellow historians. We talk about the dramatic economic changes in Korea. When I first went to Korea, it was a poor country. Now it's prosperous. We talk about the dramatic political transformation. When I first went to Korea, it was a dictatorship, not sort of a democracy, sort of. And people miss out on the third dramatic transformation in religious affiliation. It's very dramatic. Going from 3% to 50% in basically a little more than half a century. You know, there are reasons for that, which I don't have time to really get into today. And this may surprise you, North Korea, which is a totally different religious culture now, that's where the Christians were before 1945. Pyongyang is the capital of North Korea, right? 25% of Pyongyang were Protestant Christians in 1945. Okay? Most Buddhists were in the south, but the Christians were in the north. Half of the Catholics were in the north for 1945. Okay? There's also a religion called Chundokyo, which is a new religion born in the 19th century, an indigenous Korean religion. Most of them are in the north as well. But nevertheless, the majority of Koreans still were not religious in 1945, religious in terms of saying they had a specific religion. About, again, 3%, 4% is all it was. But 18% of the people in North Korea in 1945 said they had a religion. 18%, compared to 4% for the whole peninsula. Now, here's some architectural evidence for dramatic religious growth in Korea. If you don't believe statistics, count the buildings. In 1962, Buddhist denominations reported about 2,300 Buddhist temples in South Korea. 1997, the last figures I got, 11,500. Now it's over 12,000. That shows there's more people going to Buddhist temples regularly, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. What about Protestant churches? 1962, around 7,000, a little less than 7,000. Now, well, 1997, 58,000. The last figure I saw that I did put on here, 70,000 from 2013. 70,000 Protestant churches in South Korea. Mm-hmm. Catholic churches, Catholics have difficulty having many churches because the church needs a priest who has to be celibate. A lot of Korean men said, I don't think so. But there were 313 churches in 1965, Catholic churches. Now it's 1,366. Actually, it's not, now it's 1,400. Mm-hmm. And unlike Catholic churches in North America, they tend to have 2 or 3 priests at them. Mm-hmm. So you just all you have to do is look at the architectural landscape and you'll see the tremendous growth and organized religious activity. Here's a chart to help you figure it out. On your, see, my left, your right. There's a chart from 1985. The government started asking on the census about religion in 1985. Before that, they didn't ask that question. Mm-hmm. And you can see the non-religious group at the top, but it's shrinking, right? Again, this only goes to 2005. And you can see some of the figures here on how it's, in In 1985, 21% of the population were Christian, Catholic, and Protestant combined. Now that's Protestants. Okay? Catholics about another 11%. Number of Buddhists has grown too. As the number of Christians has grown larger, so has the number of Buddhists, or people who say they're Buddhist. You can see it again here. 1985 is the dark blue, then you got your green, 1995, 2005 is yellow. So you see the Catholic Church is growing faster recently. Buddhists and Protestants kind of leveling off. Okay. What's interesting, half the population say they're not a member of any religious organization. But then you ask the people, Gallup asked this, the government doesn't. Gallup says, do you believe in a God? 15% said no. So 85% said they believe in either God with capital G or God's little g. But 35% of the population who believe in a God are not a member of a religion. What's going on there? Okay. Oops, let me go back. Okay. People who don't say, who don't confess a specific religious orientation, who say, I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Buddhist, they will still go to a shaman. By the way, shamanism is not considered a religion, so Koreans won't say, I'm a shamanist. Only a shaman says that. People go to Buddhist temples all the time who won't say they're Buddhist. A lot of the good temples are in the mountains. I've hiked to the mountains, and I've gotten up there, and I've seen people praying for a statue of the Buddha. And I'll say, are you a Buddha? And they say, no, why do you ask? So you're praying, just in case. And of course, they'll have a Confucian service for their ancestors, but they won't say they're Confucian. 35% of South Koreans told Gallup that they believe that they are capable of living a good life, a moral life, without the help of a religious organization. They don't believe, many Koreans, at least about a third of the population, believe you don't need to be a member of a religious organization to be a good person. What is happening, the notion of religion is a modern concept in Korea. It was introduced by the Japanese, really. The terminology was introduced by the Japanese. It was Christianity in the form of Catholicism, which entered in the late 18th century, and Protestantism in the late 19th century, which introduced the most specific notion of what a religion is. Koreans hadn't thought that way before. Only people who had a religious affiliation were religious specialists like shamans, Buddhist monks. Buddhist monks were Buddhists. People who went to the temple were not. But in Christianity, you go to church, you're a Christian, right? That's a new concept. The boundaries between religion traditionally were porous. You could go to a shaman in the morning, a Buddhist temple at noon, have a Confucian ritual that afternoon, but you wouldn't go to a Christian ritual and go to the other three too. Christians don't do that. They're supposed to just stick to their religion. That's not I would say they didn't ask you, if you go to a Buddhist temple even today, they don't ask you, do you believe in the Buddha? That's irrelevant. They're ritual-based religions. It's what you do. You go to a shaman never asks if you believe in the gods. The shamans have many gods. So it's what you do, what rituals you perform, and your ethical behavior. That's more important than what you believe. And the government controlled religion in traditional Korea. The government decided which gods could be worshipped, by whom, when, and where. That's why Catholics were persecuted very heavily. In fact, about 8,000 of Korea's first Catholics were killed over the course of the 19th century. Their crime was, when their parent died, they refused to erect a spirit tablet, a tablet with the name of the deceased mother or father, and bow before it, because the Pope had told them they couldn't do that. They were killed by the government for not performing a ritual in honor of their own parents in their own home, as the government said they had to perform. That's not religious freedom, is it? That's not the way Korea is now. That's the way it used to be. Now religion has a specific meaning, many borrowed from Christianity. The notion that religious communities, not just Christian, are composed of people who share similar beliefs, right? Creed. They meet regularly as a congregation. Now you have Buddhist communities meeting on 10 o'clock on Sunday mornings. Where'd they get that idea? And they express through ritual their common beliefs and values. This definition of religion assumes a specific religious affiliation. So it assumes that people say, if I go to a temple every Sunday at 10 o'clock, I must be a Buddhist. Just like if a Christian goes to church every Sunday at 10 o'clock, they must be Christian. That was not the way they thought 150 years ago. So the rise in religious affiliation that I showed you earlier, from 3% to 50%, is not so much a rise in religious behavior as it is a rise in the way people characterize their religious behavior. Now the 50% of the population says, I'm a member of a religious community. But still 35% who believe in God or gods aren't willing to say that yet. Now, the problems with this definition, It was brought by Christianity, so it fits Christianity quite well. Japanese, by the way, didn't like things like shamanism. They didn't like some Korean new religions. They called them fake religions, pseudo-religions. Shamanism is when the government asks people what your religion is, they list religions, they never put shamanism on there. It's never on there. Okay? And also Confucianism, it's underestimated because it doesn't have the kind of weekly meetings that religion is supposed to have, so people don't say they're Confucians. Okay. And there are religions that are not religious. They don't call themselves religions in Korea. Shamanism is called a culture. Shamans engage in interactions with supernatural entities. By the way, 99% of women. Yet Koreans don't say it's a religion. In fact, some shamans have said, oh, what I do is superstition. Okay? Animism is the belief in natural objects. You go to a Buddhist temple, off to the side you'll see a shrine to the mountain god. I've seen sacred trees in Korean villages. That's animism. Okay? And Confucianism survives in ancestor rituals and in rhetoric. Filial piety, sincerity, loyalty, trustworthiness, those kind of things. But Koreans don't call it a religion, they call it a philosophy. This is animism. Let me go back a minute. Over on, let's see, my left, your right. Okay, these the Changsung are these spirits that protected villages. Okay, and over here is a shrine to the mountain god. Every mountain has a mountain god. Okay. Here's a contemporary shaman. I know her quite well. She married a graduate student of mine. Yeah, he was studying her for his PhD. They fell in love. She makes more money than he does, even though he has a PhD. She's famous in Korea. Okay, and here's another. Confucians say this is not religious. Is this religious to you? They're honoring Confucius. They're bowing before a portrait of Confucius, and the plaque there says the most sincere man of all. But they say this is not religion. It's philosophy. Okay? Now, when you get to real religions, I distinguish between what I call anthropocentric religion and theocentric. Anthropocentric means centered on human beings. In other words, they don't pray to a god. They work on cultivating their own moral character. And you find that in Korea in meditative Buddhism, the Buddhism that says, sit down, clear your mind of all attachments to things of this world. And when you finally realize your own inner Buddha nature, when you die, you don't have to be born again to suffer again, because they believe this world is a world of constant disappointment and therefore constant suffering. This is an example of a modern temple in Seoul called Nungen Sunwan, which can be literally translated as a meditative center for able people, or capable people. Very, very popular. They claim to have a congregation of 200,000. They're in the Gangnam area, you know, Gangnam style? That's where they are. And these are lay people who call themselves Buddhists, meditating. But there's another group, I mentioned Won Buddhism. It's a new religion, about 100 years old. In fact, I just participated in their 100th anniversary celebration last May. Notice the circle? There's no Buddhist statues in their temples. Instead, they concentrate their devotion on a circle. What's the circle? It reminds them that everything is connected to everything else. That's what Won Buddhism is all about. It's not about a god. It's about recognizing you're connected to everything else. And so you try to encourage those kind of emotional attitudes that remind you of that connection. So you act as part of your community rather than act selfishly. Looks like a church, doesn't it? Except for the circle. You walk in, they give you the parish bulletin, and you sit in the pews, and the preacher, can you see there, he got a pulpit, and they sing hymns, but they're Buddhist. They're one Buddhist. Okay. Now, theocentric Buddhism, is the most popular form of Buddhism. Meditative Buddhism is not easy. Try sitting and not thinking about anything. If I tell you, don't think about a white elephant, you all thought about one, didn't you? See, you can't do that. That's too hard for most people. So most people go to a Buddhist temple to pray. There are many Buddhist statues in the temples, many. Yeah, I'll show you an example in a minute. And you go there to ask for specific things. You might ask for, there's a Buddha in charge of medical problems called the Healing Buddha. Okay? There's a Buddha you go to, actually he's a Bodhisattva, which is almost a Buddha. Bodhisattva is a person who reached a level of enlightenment that could leave this world of constant suffering, but they decided to stick around for a while to help the rest of us reach the same degree of spiritual advancement. So people go to that Bodhisattva when a relative has died. You have 40 days between when they die and when they're going to be reincarnated. Buddhists believe you're born again. Right? You go to this Buddha is basically a defense attorney. He said, please help my relative be born in a better place than they actually deserved, a better form of life. Okay? I've seen Buddhist temples having special prayer services to help young parents go there so their son or daughter can get into the best universities in Korea. Okay, I've seen the signs. Okay. You can go to a Buddhist temple to find a good spouse and pray to the Buddha to introduce a good spouse to your children. So most Buddhist visitors to temples are not going there to meditate. Increasingly, meditation has become popular in urban centers for the lay Buddhist, but still, most of the people in temples are there to pray, not to meditate. This is a typical Buddhist temple. This is the new one. Can you see there? They're actually planting the two small figures, which are bodhisattvas. You've got the historic Buddha in the middle. On the side, one of them is the healing Buddha. I think the other one is Amitabha, the Buddha who presides over the Buddhist paradise, and then a couple of helping Buddhas on the side, the bodhisattvas. So this is not monotheistic, is it? It's not one God. You got 5 different Buddhas there. Okay. Now, of course, there's also Christianity in Korea, which is also theocentric. Buddhism, I call devotional Buddhism theocentric. I call meditative Buddhism anthropocentric. Right? Christianity is clearly theocentric. Right? It's all about worshiping God, obeying God's commands, reading God's word. That's theocentric. The Catholic community, which is what I've spent a lot of my life studying as well, Catholic community began in 1784 before there were any missionaries in Korea. Catholic books written in Chinese by missionaries in China made it to Korea, got some Koreans curious. A Korean went to Beijing, met a foreign missionary there, was converted to Catholicism, and came back and started baptizing his buddies. Maybe a good thing to do spiritually, bad thing to do in terms of lifespan. He and others were executed in 1801. So they had a whole century of harsh persecution. I've told you about 8,000, we think approximately, were executed between 1791 and 1871. Now, Catholicism changed the religious culture of Korea in a couple of ways. One way it changed, it introduced the notion of one and only one God. Now, I know there are many Koreans who say that Koreans have always believed in one God. I'm an historian. I don't find it in the documents. Sorry, it's not there. Okay? In fact, the term that Koreans use now for one God that Protestants use was invented by a Canadian missionary, but in late 19th century. So when Catholics came in, they said, look, there's only one God. There's not other, forget about these other spirits. They're false gods. Okay? And when you only have one God, you should have good relations with that one God. Forget about the others. So you have to be a member of an exclusive religious community. Remember I said that Koreans used to have no problem with going to a shaman, a Buddhist temple, a Confucian ritual all on the same day. Christians don't do that. Christianity taught exclusive commitment. One thing that means, by the way, is that not just the priest, and priests were finally smuggled into Korea in 1795. Chinese priest, he was killed in 1801. Some more French priests came in the 1830s, they were killed. Some more came in the 1850s, they were killed in the 1860s. But in the Catholic community, it's not just the priest who's a Catholic, so are the people who believe what he's preaching. That's a new concept in Korea. Remember, Buddhist monks used to preach, but that didn't mean people who listened to them were Buddhist. Right? It's a new concept. So Catholicism created this notion of first exclusive religious orientation, and secondly, this idea that there's one God and only one God. This is a new idea. The Catholic community, because of persecution primarily, didn't grow very fast until the 1970s. And those who know Catholic Church history can understand what happened. In the 1960s, there was something called Vatican II, a council in which the Catholic Church worldwide agreed you didn't have to say Mass in Latin anymore. You could say it in a local language. Suddenly, Koreans didn't have to know Latin to be a Catholic. Made it a lot easier to be a Catholic. Mass is in Latin. And also, until the 1960s, the Catholic Church in Korea, the priests were dominated by foreign priests. The last American bishop retired about 10 years ago, by the way. But now it's mostly Korean priests coming into the church, which Koreanizes the church. And I didn't put it on the slide, but they also got involved in the democratization movement in the 70s and 80s to make Korea a democratic country. And that made the Catholic Church look like it was really a Korean church. So now the Catholic Church is the largest growing major religious group in Korea. And I think it's because they have Korean priests, they have Mass in Korean. They're very Korean, by the way, I promise you. Much more conservative. Catholic Mass is the women still have to cover their hair, which they don't in North America so much. Right? And they show up for Mass an hour beforehand. and saying hymns before Mass starts. Catholics in North America tend to show up after Mass has started. And they stick around for an hour or two afterwards and have a little snack with a little rice wine sometimes. That's what they do. Now, here's the Catholic Church, the pictures of it. This is the main cathedral in Seoul called Myeongdong Cathedral. It was built in the 1880s, Gothic style. Right? It, by the way, was a major center for pro-democracy movements in the 1970s. And these are Catholic women at a typical Mass. Notice they got their hair covered. Catholic women used to do that in North America. And there's a huge church there with several priests. They now have over 4,000 priests in South Korea. There are 100,000 Protestant ministers, by the way. Okay. Now, Catholic Church comes in 1784, undergoes a century of persecution. There were mostly French missionaries that were there in the 19th century. In 1884, exactly 1 century later, the first Protestant missionaries arrived. Now, Christianity was still illegal. So these were American missionaries. How did they get into Korea? They said, we're not missionaries. We're here to build modern schools and modern hospitals. So the government said, you're welcome, come on in. And even though they did that just to be able to get into the country, it really helped the Protestant church. They were not persecuted. Okay? And it became the modern religion because they built modern schools and modern hospitals. If you wanted to be modern, you became a Protestant Christian, not a Catholic Christian until the 1980s, because Catholics were out there hiding away in the mountains trying to avoid persecution. Protestants were in the cities, teaching people modern subjects, not just religion, teaching them math, teaching them geography, teaching them world history, curing them with Western medicines. So it's no coincidence that the most modern part of Korea, which is Gangnam, is the most Protestant part of Korea, 40%. Because to be Protestant is to be modern until recently. And Protestantism introduced one new element to Korean religious culture, which now other groups have picked up on. In a Catholic Mass, until they had the Mass in Korean, people would just sit there and watch the priest say Mass in Latin. At a shaman ritual, you sit and watch the shaman contact the gods. At a Buddhist ritual, you watch the monks do their thing. What do you do in a Protestant ritual? You pray along with the pastor. You sing. You have vocal praying together. Participatory worship, a brand new idea in Korean religion and a very popular idea. People like to participate. I know Korean Christians who come to North America and go to, say, an American or Canadian church, they say it's boring. Because in Korea, you're active the whole time. Now, other groups have picked up on this. The Catholics have since they Mass in Korean. Buddhist groups now have hymns and Buddhist rituals on Sunday. So all the groups, some of the new religions too, have like Won Buddhism or participatory rituals. Protestantism introduced that idea that rituals are not just for the ritual specialists, they're for the average believer. And something else Protestants did. Now, Catholics couldn't go out and preach real heavily because they'd be killed. Protestants are very aggressive in proselytizing. Go to my church or you go to hell. I've seen signs like that in the last year in Korea. And it worked. And then they gained a lot of believers at first. Not so much until 1945, but 1960 they started gaining a lot of believers. It went from 600,000 to 8 million in the course of 3 decades. And so other religions have picked up on this. I've had Buddhists come to me and say, you better become a Buddhist. Buddha's returning to Earth next year. Okay. And I see Catholics on the street now proselytizing, which you don't see in North America, right? But you do in Korea sometimes, but mainly it's Protestants on the street. So they introduced this new notion that there's 2 components. One is it's very important which religious community you are a part of, which is a new notion to Koreans, new in the last 2 centuries. Secondly, that it's your obligation, if you believe in the true religion, to get others to accept your beliefs and join you. That was a new idea. So they grew rapidly between 1960 and 2000. We're waiting to see the 2015 census figures, but it looks as though Protestants used to say they were going to be 50% of the population. They appear to be stagnated around 21, 22%. It's probably oversaturation of the market, basically, with 70,000 churches, 100,000 pastors, all competing with each other, including within the same denomination. Here's a typical large, well, this is not typical, actually. This is the largest, maybe the largest church in the world, or maybe one in Nigeria is bigger. This is Yoido Full Gospel Holiness Church, which claims to have in its congregation 800,000 in the congregation. Obviously, they can't get 800,000 people into their church. They get about 20,000. Okay? What do? The pastor's sermons are on, there used to be closed circuit TV, now I guess it's internet, around the world. This is one church, not one denomination, one church. They're having trouble now. The pastor who founded it and built it up from one small tent to this massive church, again, pretty close to the Gangnam area, on an island between Gangnam and northern Seoul. He was convicted of corruption 3 years ago. He had trouble distinguishing between church funds and private and personal funds was the problem. We thought the church was going to split. So far, it seems to be sticking together. It's not growing anymore, but it seems to be sticking together. Notice the big screen, you know. And these are, when you leave this service, you're sweating from all the shouting and moving your hands and praying out loud. It's a very dynamic church service. Like this. Got to raise those hands. Hallelujah. Yeah, that's just, if pastor's preaching in a Protestant church and the congregation is quiet, something's wrong. They've got to respond, right? I don't see Buddhists doing that or Catholics doing that, but Protestants definitely do that. The vast majority of Korean Protestants are fundamentalist, evangelicals, or even charismatic. Fundamentalists mean they believe in the literal interpretation of the Bible. They believe the world was created in 7 days. Evangelical, they feel compelled to share their faith with others. And that includes, by the way, because I've been going to Korea for 45 years, I've encountered this many times, a Korean who will come to me and try to get me, if they see me studying, for example, a particular Presbyterian church, that's the largest denomination of Korean Protestants, Presbyterians, they will say, don't go to that pastor, go to this pastor, he's better. It's worship of the pastor in Korea, I would say. You know, it's really pastor-centered. People choose a church based on the pastor. The second largest group is Methodists, by the way, but Presbyterians are like 70%, 65% of the Korean Protestants. But it's all about the pastor. And Korea has 6 of the 10 largest congregations in the world in the Protestant community. They're really in the mega churches. Why does this happen? What's going on? Well, traditional religion, which was Buddhism and shamanism, and often people didn't distinguish them really well. In fact, if you ask a shaman what a religion is, you'll probably say Buddhist. That was part of village society. Even as late as 1960, only 25% of South Koreans lived in a community of more than 50,000 people. Korea had incredibly rapid urbanization. Today, 25 million Koreans live in the Seoul area, half the population. And there are several other huge cities, Busan, Daegu, even Gwangju's over 1 million. So what happened? People moved from these villages. What happened? Again, shamanism and Buddhism was part of village life. You move to the city, and you're kind of at a loss. You don't know what's going on, right? But people come to you and say, oh, you're kind of lonely here, right? Yeah, I don't know anybody. Come to my church. And they do that. They knock on doors. And the churches provide you the kind of community you lost when you left your village. Because it's not just on Sunday. It's every day. All these huge congregations break down in the groups of 10 people who live close to each other, who meet regularly during the week to study the Bible together. Catholics and Protestants both do that. So it gives you a community in an environment which is very easy to become anonymous, basically. And also it helped that Christianity, particularly Protestant Christianity, was identified with modernity. Want to be modern? You become a Protestant Christian. Seoul is the most modern city in Korea, and that's where Christianity is strongest. What I can't figure out, though, there's a city, Busan is the second largest city in Korea, way down in the southeast, and there Buddhists outnumber Christians 2-1, and the third largest city as well, Daegu. And I still can't figure that out. I'm not a sociologist, I'm an historian, but I got to work with the sociologists to try to figure out what's going on there. You see a lot of churches in Busan and Daegu, because I spent a lot of time there. But if you ask people what the religion is, more than double the number of people will say they're Buddhists and say they're Christians, where in Seoul it's the opposite. There's more than 2 Christians for every Buddhist in Seoul. One of the nice things about Korea, South Korea, with all these religions, you would think there'd be a lot of religious conflict, right? No, there isn't. I took this photo several years ago. I was wandering around Korea on Christmas, and I went to a Buddhist temple. Do you recognize what's in the Buddhist temple gate? Christmas trees. That is not that unusual. Okay? Buddhists celebrating Christmas. Okay? And I have seen on Catholic churches, not so many Protestant churches, in Catholic churches on Buddha's birthday, which is a big celebration for Buddhists, banners saying, congratulations, Buddhist, on Buddha's birthday. So what we see is religious harmony, not conflict. And probably because no one group dominates, so they can't afford to try to attack the others, right? They'll be outnumbered, right? Here's another example. I mentioned I have a book out, only costs $17 on Amazon. This is the cover, Korean Spirituality, but I want to show you the picture. That's a Won Buddhist nun, remember the Won Buddhists, the circle people? With a mainstream Buddhist nun, meditative Buddhist, with a Catholic nun meditating together, praying together. They actually travel around and sing their sacred songs of their various religions together. Okay? Notice there's no Protestants there, though. The Protestants are the least cooperative with other religions, and they're the most aggressive in proselytizing. Okay. What about North Korea? We can't leave Korea without talking about North Korea, right? Totally different world. Remember, before 1945, that's where the Christians were, right? Catholics and Protestants. This is in Pyongyang. This is called the Juche Tower. Juche is what I call the North Korean equivalent of a religion. It's their ideology that functions as a religion. The light is on in this tower even when the rest of the city is dark because of problems with electricity. They ensure the Juche Tower is always lit. Okay? So I call Juche like a religion. There are official religious organizations in North Korea. There's a Catholic group, a Protestant group, a Buddhist group, and a group from this new religion called Chundokyo. But they're very small and they're controlled by the government. The largest one has 13,000 members. Okay. But everybody in North Korea has to believe in Juche. If you translate Juche literally, it says self-reliance, but it really means rely on the leader, who right now is Kim Jong-un. Okay. And in many ways, it functions like a religion. Okay. Kim Ilsung is the founder of Juche. He died in 1994. All over North Korea, there are signs saying, who knows Korean in here? He lives forever. He's with us forever. That sounds kind of religious, doesn't it? You know, his writings are like the Bible. You know, whenever you're reading a book that has a quotation from Kim Il-sung in it, suddenly it's bold-faced. Sacred statement by Kim Il-sung. Right? Okay. Every home has to have portraits of Kim Il-sung and his son Kim Jong-il, the father of the current leader, and you cannot let those portraits get dust on them. People from the local party committee check on that because they're sacred objects. Just recently, there was a big flood in North Korea, near the border with China. There was a big article in the Korean press about a man who died trying to rescue his portraits of Kim Il-sung from the floods. He was being praised as a martyr. That sounds religious to me, doesn't it? Do I have to go further and tell you that when Kim Il-sung died, birds flew to Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea, to cry? And when Kim Jong-il was born, rainbows appeared in the sky? So, if you don't believe it's religious, this is a very common sight in Pyongyang. Actually, not anymore, because now it's a new statue. This was when Kim Jong-il was still in charge. Now you got a statue of Kim Il-sung, which is that, plus his son, Kim Jong-il. And not only school children, foreign visitors to Pyongyang, when you get to the airport, they give you a bouquet of flowers. They take you directly to the statue, and you are supposed to respectfully offer the bouquet of flowers to Kim Il-sung. I was with a bunch of South Koreans once. We were supposed to go to North Korea at a time of relatively warm relations, a bunch of professors. And at the last minute, the North Korean said, by the way, don't forget you're going to go bow to Kim Il-sung's statue. And the South Korean said, I don't think so. So he canceled the trip. But I mean, look at this. I mean, this sounds very religious to me. And if you say anything negative about Kim Il-sung or Kim Jong-il or Kim Jong-un in North Korea, it's like going to the Vatican and criticizing the Pope. I wouldn't think about doing it. Mm-hmm. So, now, what are some important things to remember about sum up this brief survey of Korean religion? Okay. First of all, that in the second half of the 20th century, I showed you figures, there was a rapid rise in religious affiliation in South Korea. The percentage of the people who will tell you, if you ask them what religion they are, will give you an answer like Buddhism or Christianity. There's a small group of 1% that have other religions, but the important ones are Buddhism, Catholicism, and Protestantism. Mm-hmm. And it's an atmosphere of basically religious tolerance, what we see in South Korea. Okay? And many South Koreans, we don't know how many go to shamans, but when you have 100,000 to 300,000 practicing shamans who survive on the income they get from their clients, there must be a lot of people who believe in it. So many people engage in what we would call religious activity who would deny what they're doing is religious. Mm-hmm. I've been to many shaman rituals. If I ask the people there, do you believe in shamanism? They'll say, what do you mean believe in shamanism? I said, do you believe these gods might be able to help you? Maybe. Mm-hmm. So animism, the worship of the mountain god, very common in Korea. Going to shamans and Confucian rituals for your ancestors, where you bow before the spirit tablet that has the name of the ancestor on it. Mm-hmm. And then there are religions with no god, are gods, anthropocentric religion. I mentioned that, meditative Buddhism, and one Buddhism. There's some other new religions as well, but I don't have time to get into them. But we think in the West, if you don't have a God, you're not a religion. Buddhist monks are religious, but most Buddhist monks don't believe in Buddha as a God. Right? I've been in a Buddhist temple. There was a 2-hour service, very famous Buddhist preacher. The first hour, we were praying. He had a list of names of people with medical problems. So he led the congregation in praying to the healing Buddha to heal them. The next hour was a sermon in which he said, don't believe in the Buddha. The Buddha's a crutch. You got to believe in yourself. I said, we were just praying. At the end of that 2 hours, by the way, he finally noticed me in the back of the temple. He said, you didn't understand a word I said, did you? I said, I understand Korean. Oh, great, let's eat. So he took me to lunch. It was great. Vegetarian, of course. Okay. And of course, Korea has very strong theocentric religions, meaning devotional Buddhism, the Buddhism of the masses, and both forms of Christianity. And there's some new religions as well, which worship different gods that they say Koreans should only worship Korean gods, none of these foreign gods like Buddhism, like Buddha or Jesus. So this is South Korea in a nutshell, the religious culture. It's very different from what you see in North America. It's also very different from what you see in Japan, very different from what you see in China. There are other countries in Asia that have strong Christian communities. They tend to be Catholic. Philippines, right? Vietnam. Korea is the most Protestant nation in all of Asia in terms of the percentage of the population that is Protestant. It also has one of the largest Catholic populations in all of Asia in terms of percentage, not in terms of total numbers. And it has large numbers of Buddhists. So you have this really diverse environment in Korea where people really get along despite the differences in religious beliefs and practices. I call it the functional equivalent of religion. If you ask a North Korean, I do talk to North Koreans, we have diplomatic relations with Canada and North Korea. I say, is Juche a religion? He says, you could say that. North Koreans will tell me that. Okay, so I call it the functional equivalent. It operates as a religion for the average North Korean. So
now we'll take questions.
What exactly got you interested in studying Korea?
40 years ago, U.S. Peace Corps. I had originally studied Chinese. I studied Chinese because the U.S. government didn't give me money to go to Hawaii to study Chinese. I just wanted to go to Hawaii, all expenses paid. But then I got interested in Asia, and when I finished university, I wanted to go to Asia, didn't have any money, and Peace Corps said, we'll pay you to go to Korea. We don't have Peace Corps in China then. And I thought, how different can Korea be from China? Little did I know, right? And they sent me to the city of Gwangju. Anybody who knows Korea knows that Gwangju food is delicious. I used to be skinny. Then I went to Gwangju. Okay? And I got so fascinated by it. And that time, there was very little written in English about Korea except for the Korean War. So I figured, hey, this is great. I can be an expert. So I got my PhD in Korean history and discovered there was very little written about it because there were very few jobs for Korean historians. That's why I moved to Canada. No. But I made a really smart choice. As an historian, I've been able to watch Korea go from poverty and dictatorship to prosperity and democracy in my lifetime. It's an incredible thing to see that happen. I feel really lucky as an historian to see that dramatic historical transformation that I could personally observe. It's a great culture. Koreans are great people. Yeah.
Hi, what do you think about like the niche cult religions in Korea that's obviously revealing to have a lot of influence right now to like the government and the culture? First
of all, as someone who's a professor, I don't like the word cult. I like to treat religions on their own terms. But there are controversial religious communities in Korea. I didn't know about the one that's in the headlines now because of the influence it had on President Park Geun-hye. But I know many other religions that are quite controversial in Korea. And I've met their members. Their members seem very nice people, okay? They've never threatened me. But Koreans have a very strong sense of what's acceptable religion and what is not. And they use the term idan. Even Christians use that against other Christians. And so if you are a member of one of these minority religions, you're going to find a lot of criticism from your family and neighbors. And this group that had influence on President Park, maybe still does, they were off my radar. They were so small. I never saw one of their worship halls. So I didn't know anything about them. The groups I study are like the Unification Church. I don't like the term Moonies. They don't like that. The Unificationists. The Unification Church is controversial. In Korea, Mormons are considered heretics. If you become a Mormon, your family will really argue with you if they're Protestant Christians. They will tell you you're going to hell for being a Mormon. Koreans can be very rigid, Korean Protestants especially, and they use the term cult a lot. We, scholars of religion, try to avoid that term. We say controversial religions. And I use to say religious people, I mean people who proclaim a specific religious affiliation. But I agree there are people who engage in religious activities, have religious beliefs, who are not a member of any religious community. There are a lot of them in Korea. I agree with that. By the way, this getting up early in the morning to pray to God, the average Protestant Christian goes to church 7 days a week. If they work in Seoul, they will be at church at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning, then come home, eat breakfast, and go to work. I still remember one time I was in Seoul and I had jet lag. So I woke up at 5 a.m. I'm walking down the street trying to find a coffee shop or something open that time of day. Suddenly I hear singing coming from all directions. Church had started at 5:30 a.m. When the Koreans are devout, they are devout. I can't get up at 5:30 in the morning every day, forget it. But you're right, there are a lot of people who pray to God above without considering themselves a Christian or a Buddhist or whatever. Yeah.
Really wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome.